Live and on the air.
Did you hear the other?
Peter, do you want to do an
Projector
announcement
for
about
us.
self-insurance?
So I just took all of our
Okay,
equipment
would
out of the
Join us
office
for the Pledge of
yesterday
Allegiance, please.
to go there tonight.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I have to go there tonight and get
Who
it.
wants to talk first? You, go ahead.
Because I have to be in Lynn tomorrow at
Thank everybody for coming and then read down the lines. How's everyone doing? I missed you. Well, I'd like to thank you all for coming. Let's see if we can get something accomplished here that is going to be to everyone's benefit, and hopefully yours the most, because I'm not far behind you. Actually, I might be ahead of a couple of you. So what we're looking for is some answers to some of the problems we've had since, since we got here. So what do you think are Littleton's senior housing needs? What do we need the most?
May I speak?
Well, let's get through this whole list, and then we're going to let our consultant speak, and then you may speak.
Maybe. All right, I know what you can do. I'm all set.
Need more housing.
Wow, geez, all right, we can all go home now. All right, so what does the senior housing industry look like in eastern Massachusetts today? How has it changed? What options are available to Littleton to address the housing needs of its senior citizens? What about Littleton families with an elderly relative? What would the community like to see and where? And what are the opportunities and what are the hurdles we have to overcome in order to accomplish some of these goals? Okay? And what those goals actually are. So now we're going to have, and I really wasn't late.
I was very nervous about it.
Me too. I came in through this door. So,
For the bathroom.
no, it wasn't the bathroom, it was a hallway. I have a rule, if you can't be on time, be early. Unfortunately, I was right on time. So we're going to turn this over to, say that again?
To RKG.
Yes, what, do you know her real name? Judy. If you would, please.
Yes, thank you
Lead
very
us down
much.
this path.
Nice to be here and nice to see all of you. I'm going to kind of walk you through a bunch of slides to sort of address some of the issues that were just certainly referred to in the flyer for this meeting. My colleague Amanda Berman will probably jump in from time to time too. We both kind of worked on this project to try to come here this evening with some information from you for you about what's going on with the senior housing industry generally in eastern Massachusetts, what the different forms of senior housing are because the industry has changed significantly, and give you some images that you can respond to, just building types. Because part of what really prompted us to be here in the first place is the planning board wanted us to take a look at your existing Article 23 in your zoning bylaw, which is where you provide for senior housing development. You have 2 developments right now under that bylaw. I think an issue is, could it be more productive if it perhaps were written differently, if it provided for different types of buildings and so forth. So in order for us to even come back and make recommendations to the planning board, we need to try to get a sense of what the community even wants to see. So that'll be the sort of later part of the meeting. But first of all, I think we're going to get into kind of what's going on with the industry. Do you want to run this or do you want me to?
Oh, do you want me to click through?
Oh, it's over there. I
Yeah.
kept looking at this laptop thinking, oh, you've got it. Okay.
I can sit there if that's easier.
Do you mind?
No, just tell me when to click.
Because I'm afraid if I stand here doing this, I'm going to have my back half to people. It always feels weird when you're doing a presentation. You've got your back to somebody, right? You can't have my back to you.
Well, look at this.
That's fine. Go right ahead.
Look what she just said.
She's younger than I am. She's younger than I am. Okay. So slide 1. So while we're here, we're going to do a little bit of a presentation. We're going to respond to questions. I want to talk a little bit about senior housing needs, what's going on with the industry, and then when we finish this, I want to talk about kind of next steps that we'll be going through with the planning board. So go ahead, Amanda. You have a zoning bylaw, as I said, that you adopted in around 2005, which is roughly 10 years after the federal government said we need to loosen the rules on senior housing development in the United States. Prior to 2005, most senior housing development, whether in Massachusetts or anywhere else in the country, was geared mainly toward households of people who were 62 or over. The rules for kind of the younger set, which is this active adult housing I'm going to talk about in a few minutes, people who are 55 or over, It was a much more tightly regulated and not very productive set of laws. As of 1995, when Congress adopted the Housing for Older Persons Act, over 55 development regulations were liberated significantly, and we began to see a real proliferation of so-called active adult housing in the United States right around the time that people in my age cohort, I know you're still behind me, right? So by the time that people in my age cohort were starting to think about what's the future of my housing. So your bylaw right now provides for kind of a mix of either two-family or one family or two-family dwelling units. There is a provision for the inclusion of affordable units in your bylaw. Right now, you say you have to have a minimum of 5 acres for a senior housing development. You can get a density incentive of up to 3 units per acre, which is more density than you normally allow, if at least 25% of the units in your development are affordable to people who are moderate income. Or you can go up to 4 units an acre if you mix the affordable units so that some are affordable to people who are low income and some to moderate income. And you've had 2 developments done, or I think they're both moderate income, 25% if I'm not mistaken. So we went out, we kind of took a look at those developments, and we've looked at a lot of others kind of around the region in order to put this meeting together tonight. So the questions that we're trying to wrestle with in providing technical assistance and advice to the planning board is, number one, what can be done, if anything, in your community to create more senior housing? That's sort of the big kind of overarching question. In order to answer that, part of what we have to understand is kind of what's the market for senior housing? What is that market comprised of? What metrics tend to attract senior housing developers? Because you don't get the housing if it's not feasible from a development point of view. And then, can the present bylaw, the Article 23 that I just referred to, can it be tweaked and made more productive, or does it really need kind of fundamental change? And that's part of what we're trying to understand in this process. So let me give you kind of an overview of what's going on with the senior housing industry and just how much this concept of senior housing has changed over the last 20 years. Go ahead. Senior housing is not just one housing type. It's not just Jeanette Way. It's not just Reed Lane, I think is what it's called. That's a type of senior housing, but that's not all that senior housing is. There's actually a continuum of housing types, and they're designed for people as they age. So the needs of someone who's 55 are not the same as the needs of someone who is, say, 85 or 90. So there are considerations that go into this definition. One is just sort of physical. People who are citing senior housing think about kind of the location and what the housing has access to, what kind of interior amenities and exterior amenities does it take to actually attract people and make them want to live in these developments, and then how do you sort of price that in a way that also makes the housing affordable. It's a real challenge. There are also programmatic aspects. As you get into housing that's more service enriched, there are a variety of program and service needs that also sort of add to the cost of the housing, but become increasingly important as people age. And those services may be social, they may be health related, they may be medical. And then there are models of ownership. Some developments, like the 2 that you have in your community, they make for sale units. They're units that someone can buy. If they want to downsize, they can buy a smaller unit, a 2-family or a single-family dwelling. Senior housing also comes in a variety of rental models, especially for people as they get older. And then there are some that are also owned in what's called a co-op, which is that you sort of own a share of a corporation that owns the development, but you're also paying rent every month. That's a very common model in other states, not quite so much in Massachusetts, but we do have a few of them. Senior housing may be restricted by deed. It does not have to be restricted by deed. And I think one of the things you're going to find is that as this industry evolves, we're actually seeing more interest from developers in having what's called age-targeted housing that's designed for seniors, but not necessarily bound by a deed restriction. And there are market-based reasons for that, which we'll talk about a little bit as we go forward here. But for the most part, if they're deed restricted, they may be deed restricted for households that are over 55, or 55 or over rather. If there is a federal subsidy involved, sometimes the age limit is 62 and sometimes it's 65. So the idea of where one lives and what kind of care one gets are really two very different concepts. There's senior housing that people simply live in. Jeanette Way is a good example. They are strictly dwelling units. People come and go as they choose. They're mobile. They don't have any particular service needs. And then there's their care facilities, and those are also residential. Often when communities I work in, people say assisted living or something is actually a business. It's not. People go there to live and they die there. They are housing. But they're service enriched, they're service-based types of residents. And so just distinguishing between ones that are sort of more care-oriented versus straight living-oriented will help you, I think, as we go on in this, understand why the building forms themselves are different. It's a lot easier to house someone who doesn't really have any particular service needs in a single-family or two-family dwelling. But if somebody has a memory care problem, you're not housing them in two-family units. You're housing them in a very different type of building because you have to protect their safety. There are other kinds of service options or care options for seniors. Some of you may be very familiar with these ideas. Adult daycare, where people who otherwise live at home but go to some kind of center during the day for social and leisure and health reasons and so forth, simply to be safe during the day. Adult daycare is an increasingly common need, often comes associated with assisted living residences. There's adult respite care, so for seniors who are living with a family member and the family members want to go on vacation or something like that, there's respite care, and often that kind of care is provided by assisted living or even skilled nursing facilities. And then, of course, there's hospice. So there's a whole continuum, and that's, I think, the point I want to just drive home. There's a continuum of stuff that we call senior housing. And part of what you're going to need to think about as a community is how far do you want to go with this? Okay. So I want to talk a little bit about what these models are because they collectively comprise what we call senior housing. There's active adult, kind of like what you have now with Article 23 in your zoning bylaw. There is senior apartments, which are very similar, but they tend to be more of a rental model than ownership. They tend to be in different kinds of buildings. They're not single-family or two-family dwellings. There's independent living. There's assisted living. There's memory care. Skilled nursing. This is essentially a continuum is what this is. Skilled nursing, a concept called life care, which is typically related to a continuing care retirement community, or a CCRC. I'm going to start slipping into acronyms. I can't help myself. And then long-term care, and then home care. People I know will ask at some point, what about aging in place? And I will talk about that. And home care is typically associated with aging in place. Active adult housing, kind of like what you have now, can be single family, can be two family. It often comes in townhouse structures. It is always age targeted. It may or may not be age restricted. It is typically designed in a way that will appeal to an older demographic. It's single floor living, typically. A laundry room, when there is one, is sort of a side-by-side kind of arrangement. There is a sort of a management structure built in, so people tend to kind of be free of kind of maintenance that they normally would have if they were living in their own single-family home. The infrastructure in these developments tends to have like wide sidewalks and vegetation so that people who maybe have some mobility impairments but are otherwise living independently can easily get around in the development. We're seeing fewer kind of resort-style over 55 developments today. 10 years ago, we were seeing a lot of, or even 15 years ago, the sort of golf course, townhouse, Belmont, type of development. We're not seeing as many of those anymore. That market has become a bit saturated, and to some extent, at least in this region. And to some extent, it's simply because the housing is so expensive, and there's only so much of a market that can afford the very expensive dwellings. So you might still hear about some of these from time to time, but they tend to occur in what we call niche markets, very high-end communities where there frankly is just a lot of money floating in the economy. But you don't see too many of these anymore. It takes a certain amount of kind of amenity richness to attract that market. So location becomes key. People who are choosing active or adult over 55 type developments are looking for amenities, they're looking for ease of getting around, they're looking for cool things to do. They basically want to be able to sort of lock up and walk out. Very mobile population. That market's kind of drying up. So that's one group. And they tend to be sort of 55 to 75 years. I'm going to try to put age brackets around this, knowing that in doing so I'm being a little bit dangerous here because you'll find older or younger people in some of these developments. But 55 to 75 is sort of the active adult mix. Senior apartments tend to be a little older group. I won't say that you won't find younger folks in them, but a little bit older demographic. Senior apartments can be all market rate, they can be affordable, they can be mixed income. We find them in a variety of settings. They are typically in a multifamily type structure, which means that's 2 or 3 stories. They're flats. They are fairly dense. They're dense for a couple of reasons. First of all, just providing the amenities requires a certain kind of density to make it work. And there's also kind of a sort of a social component to senior apartments that just requires a certain building configuration. They typically have some amenities. They're not necessarily amenity rich the way ownership housing is, but they'll have common facilities. There may be laundry rooms in the units. There's laundry may be a common feature instead. They often have some kind of transportation service associated with them. It may be kind of limited, but there is something. There are limited outdoor amenities, a park, walkways, and so forth. These are not as amenity rich as, say, a higher end kind of resort type development, which tends to be a for sale model. There might be limited additional storage in addition to what people have in their units. And this group can tend to be anywhere from sort of 70 to 90. There's an interesting experiment with all market rate rental units in a lovely development in Easton, E-A-S-T-O-N, Massachusetts called Keystone on the Pond. And the developer, I'm going to actually show you some pictures of that in a little bit. The developer of that project is a very good developer, very well liked in Easton. Everybody was thrilled to see this project, and he actually had some difficulty making it work because there were not enough seniors who were able to pay the market rents that he was anticipating charging. So this gets to the whole issue of what is the income mix that you're trying to serve. Let's just go on here. Independent living is this sort of hybrid between totally active adult and assisted living. This age mix will tend to be sort of 75 to 90. It is communal living. So you may have limited cooking facilities in the units in an independent living development, but for the most part, it's common meals. There's transportation provided. There are recreation activities, what we call concierge services, people who want kind of appointments made for themselves. A lot of sort of management type of service is in independent living developments. This tends to be geared to seniors with particular kinds of needs. Minor assistance with activities of daily living, also known as ADL. I can guarantee you I will slip into that acronym repeatedly from this point on. Minor assistance with ADL. A place to live with little or no home or yard maintenance. People are just, they're beyond that at this point. They're on there, believe me. Wanting to socialize with peers and have a broader social network, and enjoying activities and meals in the company of others. This is essentially people who are sort of independent, but need some help. The reason that the buildings are communal rather than single-family or two-family homes is that first of all, it takes a certain amount of density just to make these projects work economically. Second, you have a management factor. So now you have service delivery happening in a building, and in order to make that happen efficiently, you just have to have the units kind of clustered close together. So independent living starts to get into bigger buildings. You'll see some of this in a little bit. Assisted living, 75 to 90-ish tends to be the age range. The average, the national average resident of an assisted living development is an 84-year-old woman. We have 226 assisted living residences in Massachusetts. It requires state certification, so active adult type housing doesn't really require any particular licensure. It requires approval from you folks. Independent living, unless it has a service component that becomes enough like assisted living that it needs to qualify for licensure. Generally, it doesn't. But once you're into assisted living, it requires certification from the Executive Office of Elder Affairs. This also assists residents with ALD needs, activities of daily living. I mixed up that acronym. I know, I messed it up. Basic care support in a home-like or apartment-type setting. So these are units. They may have a sort of limited kitchen-type arrangement, but for the most part, everything is communal. Meals are communal. All activities are communal. The units are fairly small. They're not as small as they used to be, though. It's interesting to watch how this product mix has changed over time. A basic provision of an assisted living development is 3 meals a day. There are recreation and social activities. This is all a package that sort of comes along with in addition to the rent. So when you live in an assisted living development, you're not only paying a rent, but there's a fee for the services that are provided in addition to that. And you get sort of full housekeeping type services. And then you can have add-ons that make the fee even higher, but that's typically how it's done. There's a basic package, and then there are more choices if you want them. Residents of assisted living facilities generally also receive assistance with medication management, coordinated health care services. The buildings tend to be multifamily, 3-story structures. They often, but not always, have a memory care component, which is the next piece I want to look at. This is really where the market is aiming with increasing intensity, is the memory care unit. It is a specialized type of assisted living residence for people who are dealing with Alzheimer's or dementia. It has design features that are very interesting. I don't know if any of you have ever been in a memory care unit, but the flooring, the walls, the lighting, there are all kinds of design elements in memory care that are intended to help the resident orient, because people, as they're losing their memory, have more trouble staying oriented. So patterns that can help people find their way to a kind of common center in the unit. They're highly secure, because if you have anyone in your family with a severe memory issue, you know that if people wander off, they can't find their way back. So these tend to be very secure types of environments. They're designed for the safety of the residents. The service package is kind of different from assisted living residents. Assisted living residents often have kind of leisure activities. Memory care is very much around brain stimulation, things to sort of try to help people retain what memory they can. These are highly supervised environments, and they're typically in a 1-story structure. So it's not uncommon for an assisted living residence, which may be a 3-story building, to have a wing that's associated with it that's 1 story, and that's where the memory care is. Okay. Skilled nursing is, I think most of you know, kind of around the clock, sort of significant assistance for people with activity of daily living needs, supervised by a licensed physician. These, of course, require licensure by the Department of Public Health. This is a different creature from assisted living. There's a full service package available for people who need to live in skilled nursing, speech, occupational, and physical therapy. Sometimes people go into skilled nursing short term, sometimes they're there for long term. So it is, to the people who live there, it is a residential use. Residents are typically there for some kind of rehab care, post-hospitalization care, respiratory care, a terminal illness, stroke recovery, or just general rehab. The age mix tends to be 80 and up. Continuing care retirement community. This is a unique breed of senior housing. This kind of is the one-stop shopping, if you will. It's where everything is when you decide to downsize from your large single-family home and go somewhere and you don't want to ever leave it. These may be ownership or rental type situations. Today they tend to be more rental. There are at least 3 levels of care in a continuing care retirement center. Typically some kind of perhaps independent living, assisted living, and skilled nursing. Residents may stay for life if it's a type of facility that provides a life care contract, which some of them do. We have a couple of Massachusetts examples. This is not a common type of senior housing development, just because these are very expensive to development. They're high risk. You don't find them all over the place. But three that come to mind, which you may be familiar with one or more of these, is Fox Hill Village in Westwood, which has independent living, assisted living, and memory care. Newbridge on the Charles in Dedham, which is a multi-generational community that has a school. It has all the types of senior housing I just mentioned, plus some kind of just regular over 55. And then Edgewood in North Andover.
Excuse me, what does CCTC mean?
CCRC is Continuing Care Retirement Community. If I wrote it all out up there, it wouldn't fit. So I just went with the acronym and figured I'll say it when I get to it.
If you got a lot of money, you can go there.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I went there and they're really beautiful. The question is, you're speaking to the wrong crowd. I tell you why, because I'm a little rough on the edges. I just tell you why. Because in this area, for one thing, in order to build something like that, like they do in Andover, which I saw in Westford, in Dedham, you need people to sell their house, which is very expensive, and then they can move into something like that.
No, I understand.
In this area, you don't have that.
I understand.
You can-
I'm just
let
going
the
through the
house, anybody
types.
can afford it.
I'm just going through the types, that's all. I'm not saying that one is right or one is better than the other. I just want people to understand when you talk about senior housing that this is an industry and it has a variety of products. I think that's really the point. Okay. Long-term care, this is sort of a bridge between assisted living and skilled nursing. It tends to be more of a home-like setting. These may actually be in small structures that are sort of contiguous to each other, almost like a cottage type of design. It provides social and health care services. Again, people who needing assistance with activities of daily living, some kind of medication management, special diets and so forth. So this is sort of a, assisted living may not be enough. Skilled nursing may be too restrictive. So this is sort of a bridge, if you will. And then home care, aging in place. Planners love to talk about aging in place. Everybody loves to talk about aging in place. It's something we all need to talk about. Sometimes it makes fire chiefs get very nervous because when you start having an aging population dispersed all over your community, it becomes very challenging, I'll just put it that way, to service a dispersely populated senior population.
Challenge for elder and human services, too.
It's a challenge for everybody, it really is. So, there are caregivers involved, typically an RN or an LPN, certified home health aides. Massachusetts has a home care program. It's sort of an example of how this works. There's both hourly and live-in care. This is a continuum. It depends on the needs of the person and, frankly, what they can afford. Typically, home care involves perhaps bathing and grooming assistance, light housekeeping, errands and shopping services, companionship, some medication management, some therapy, and post-hospital care. I think a big question for this industry is, are there going to be enough caregivers for people by the time today's 60-something, which is me, reaches their 80s? Are there actually going to be enough people? This is sort of a big focus right now in just workforce development for people kind of thinking about healthcare options. Okay. So we just want to talk to you a little bit about kind of what's going on in the region, so you kind of can put yourself in the context of what's happening in eastern Massachusetts. We're not Florida and we're not Arizona. I'm just going to start there. Go ahead. So active adult, there's still some demand for this. It's not what it was 10 years ago. I can't say the market has dried up, but where you tend to see active adult housing, it's either in a resort-type environment like the Cape. It might be in a very affluent community like Lexington or Winchester, but the prevalence of this kind of housing has really declined. It needs to be amenity-rich in order to compete. It's expensive. A question that developers who do this kind of product wrestle with a lot is, why would somebody come and live in an active adult development when they're paying somewhere around the vicinity of 150% of market rent? Why wouldn't they just go live in a multifamily development? Because the actual monthly housing cost is quite a bit more. than regular multifamily development, which is also being developed with a whole lot of amenities. So the big question is sort of what motivates people to choose over 55 housing. It's density, things to do, and the sort of lock and leave that I mentioned. I think one of the things that, if you can go on to the next slide, that would be helpful. One of the big questions, too, is what is the size of the next market? It isn't just so much who's buying these units today, but if I buy one now, are there going to be enough people my age 20 years from now who are in a buying mode to buy these units? Because at some point we know this demographic's going to shift, and I'll get to a slide about that in a minute.
Are people moving out of these after, say, 10 or 15 years?
We're starting
By
to see that,
choice
yeah.
always.
Some, yeah, because eventually active adult isn't enough. Eventually active adult isn't enough. So independent living, this is the most popular form we're seeing right now. Independent living has some advantages to the developer. It comes with some service expectations. We know of some independent living units in Massachusetts that are already kind of being repositioned to bring assisted living level services to the independent living resident so that they don't lose their market share is basically what's going on. These are also pricey, but they're service enriched. So someone can typically live in independent living for about twice what they would pay for a typical or higher end multifamily rent. So they're not only getting the housing, they're getting the services. Some independent living developments, as I said, include assisted living type services, and some assisted living developments have converted in part to independent living. We have seen that to some extent up in the sort of Andover, North Andover area. There are some assisted living developments up there that were starting to have a little trouble competing for their market share, so they've repositioned and made some of their units more like independent living. Assisted living memory care. The assisted living market is sort of saturated in some parts of the greater Boston area. Memory care, however, is not. It is one of the most, it's second to independent living. I would say memory care is probably one of the most popular products that's being developed out there. It's almost like we can't get enough of it, and I'm sure it will saturate eventually. But this is a building form that actually is probably more like what you think of in your own community. These are sort of low, they're one-story buildings, they're not huge. Memory care is typically not 80 people, it's more like maybe 30 to 40. You know, and sometimes freestanding and sometimes associated with assisted living. So why is everybody focusing on service-enriched housing? Well, I keep trying, I'm going to drop this thing, and I'm not going to drop it on you. If we go back to 1990, I know this is probably a little bit difficult to read, but you know, in 1990 in 1993 I was 43, and my mom was, I don't know, in her late 70s, and so in 1990, around 1995, I was someone who had a parent who was starting to need more than an apartment. Just starting to get to that point. By 2000, she definitely did. And she's unfortunately now gone. But so here I am now in this group. You know, I'm just picking on myself, right? I'm not going to pick on anybody else in this room. I'm in this group that's going to continue to swing up to 2030. If I'm lucky enough, I'm still alive at that point, right? We are the boomers. We were born between 1946 and 1964. We are an abundant population group. We are a ready market for new types of housing products. I'm going to generalize. We are sick and tired of taking care of big houses. We are sick and tired of taking care of everybody else. We want something more managed. We want something smaller. And eventually we're going to need it anyway. So we're all being watched very carefully by the senior housing industry. But let me tell you who else the senior housing industry is watching. My kids. And all of you should think about this. Okay. Well, if you don't, lucky, maybe lucky you. Some days that's how I feel. You know, I have 9 kids, so believe me, I have no sympathy for anybody. You know, it's our children. Because that's what the senior housing industry is watching. It's not just those of us who need the housing soon. It's that our children, when they hit 40 or 50, like I was in 1990, those kids are going to need help. So the wealth of my generation and my children's largely drives the siting decisions that senior housing developers are making. And in 1995, when Congress passed HOPA, the Housing for Older Persons Act, and I was, I don't know how old I was, 40-something. Say 20-something, right? I can say 40-something. You know, the boomers, there weren't that many that much older than I was. We were just kind of coming of age at that point, the boomer group. So active adult housing was a popular product in 2000 because that's what people wanted. But it isn't necessarily what people are looking for now. So this demographic has, there's different pieces of it. It's not just my age group, it's the next group down. So we want to understand what the community wants, because when I kind of go into a zoning bylaw and I try to pull it apart, I'm trying to think about, well, what do you want to build, if anything? So we have some images that we want to share with you, and we're going to ask you to respond to those images. Maren was kind enough to print this on great big paper. But I want to hand this out, and then I want to explain to you what you're going to be asked to do. You want to do this? I don't know how many there are in that
It's like
packet.
when you're
You
looking
guys
at your
can check.
computer and they put some real scary face in front of you and you're filming us.
It's not going to be a scary face. It's not going to be a scary face.
Scary numbers.
What we're going to ask you to do is a visual preference survey. On your way? Visual preference survey can be a very deceptive thing. Planners love to do them, and they are interesting, and they do help us. Especially if we're trying to think about writing zoning rules for building types and building sizes and density.
This is part of what she wants.
I won't say any more till I know everybody has a piece of paper.
Does everybody have a pen, or should I pass some pens out as
See their interest in wane a little bit. They want to start talking about what they.
They're going to do that now. They're going to do that now. You're welcome.
Keep it moving, baby.
So Amanda, when you go through these, 7 seconds. 7 seconds per image. Okay. We're going to show you a series of 30 images of different types of buildings. They are either in actual age-restricted developments or they are in age-targeted developments, meaning housing is designed for seniors but not necessarily has a deed restriction on them. We want you to look at these. We're going to give you about as much time as you would have if you were driving by. So you're not going to get to look very long at any given image. The reason we do this way is that people often respond to development based on what they see and about the amount of time it takes to drive by something. So we're going to time these. And if you can see on your sheet, I'm going to hold one of these up and make sure everybody knows what we're doing. It's a list of 1 to 30 images. If you really, really like something we show you, you should probably pick a +3. If you're kind of you can go with a 0, you could go with a 1. If you really dislike what we're showing you, pick a -3. What we end up doing with this is we load your answers into a worksheet, and we try to draw out kind of an average for each one of these images. We're going to do this first, and then I'm going to ask you, flip over on the other side, and we'll talk about these images, because it's just as important to me to hear what you say as it is to get your numeric response to these images. So my one big request is, before you leave tonight, make sure we get these, because I would like to be able to tally the results.
So we fill this out with the idea of what we'd like to see in Littleton.
Yes, what
No.
you would,
That's not how you termed it. You termed it how you feel about the picture that you're going to see, whether you like it or you don't
No,
like
I'm
it.
asking her how she
The back?
wants me to fill this out.
That's what she said. I
well,
believe,
yeah, it's
correct?
just, of course, if the expectation is that we're going to be making recommendations to you about ways to modify Article 23, then I think it is helpful for people to think about, well, if I saw that in Littleton, what would I think?
Okay.
You know what I
Thank
mean?
you.
But
Yep,
we're not
that's
gonna
not-
know whether these are assisted living or.
You'll know.
It's just a drive-by. I think.
We're just dealing with an image of a building.
Yes, you are.
You want to drive by this on Newtown Road?
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to now go to image 1. Amanda, I give it. Yeah.
Can we guess where they are?
Says where.
We're going to go to image 2.
Are we driving like 80-year-olds or like 20?
Go to image 3. Let's go to image 4.
That's Riverwalk.
Let's go to image 5. Image 6. Image 7. Image 8. Image 9. Image 10. Image 11. Image 12. Image 13. Image 14. Image 15. Image 16. Image 17.
Yeah.
Image 18. Image 19. Image 20. Image 21. That's actually two images of the same building, just to be clear. Image 22. Image 23. Image 24. Image 25. Image 26. Image 27. Image 28. Image 29. And image 30.
You don't have Sewer Street, then you cannot, 80% of those images, they fail.
So, if you can recall any that you particularly like, we can scoot around through this in whatever way you want. I guess I'd like to just know, for starters, are there any particular types of colors or roof lines or garages that sort of appeal to you in any of those images? If you can think of any image that sort of had a particular set of colors or roof lines or something that appealed to you, or even if you can't remember the image, can just answer perhaps the question and maybe we can find.
White, nice and bright.
Bright exterior colors?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes,
I like the neutral colors, like the tans and the light browns
okay,
and gray.
okay.
Was image 6 Riverwalk in Concord?
Riverwalk is in there, I don't remember if it's image 6. Actually, I wish I had my iPad with me, but I don't. Riverwalk is in there, yes. There are several local examples in there.
I like the variety of look. I didn't like the really flat fronted kinds of things.
Okay, all right. Yes,
I looked at a lot of them. I thought some of them were very alone. They just were standing there. There were no trees, there were no walks, there was
That's my
nothing
next
to
question.
make it happy. And and being a nurse and being in home care.
yeah,
Very stark.
yeah, and you know,
You took the pictures, I think, has a very large outcome on the.
it does, and some of them are new. So, you know, there's two issues going on here. A couple of these are fairly new, so they're cleared sites. And some of them was just, you're correct, we did take many of these pictures at this time of year, yes. But some of this, I actually think the greater issue is new construction, but that's helpful to know. Other thoughts? So sometimes when you have to make land use policy, when you have to write zoning, you've got these competing interests. You have to figure out what counts more than something else, because you may not be able to satisfy everybody's needs. So I'd like to know, yeah.
This probably belongs in the earlier section, but to what extent do these various, the spectrum of housing stock necessarily have to come with garages? Why are we using cars?
Active adult typically does because people have cars. The market expects to have a place to put their car. Typically the garage, I have to tell you, I hate those garage styles. We call them snout houses in planning. But the garage protrudes from the front of the house. but the developers will tell you that that's kind of what they need to do to make it possible to pull the car in and have a doorway inside that goes into the residence. So that market expects garages. When you start getting into independent living and certainly into assisted living, it's totally different, totally different. And I would say, when you're looking at more urban-oriented active adult housing, it's not uncommon to not see much parking. But that's just a different,
Why Washington, where it is.
But then they have transportation options.
That's my point, exactly, that's my point. So, back to this idea of trade-offs. I guess I'm curious to know what you think the most important goals are of a senior housing development. Is it small buildings? These are not necessarily mutually exclusive, but they can be. Is it small buildings? Is it having homes that are for sale, ownership housing? Is it providing assisted living? Is it housing affordability? Or something else? Because you often can't do all of those things. What do you think the most important?
Affordability is very important, because a lot of people have homes, they can't afford the taxes, $10,000, and a lot of people say, is there anything we can do?
Yep.
And some to say, maybe from 3 or 4 bedroom, they like to have 2 bedrooms, so the taxes were smaller, they don't have too many amenities, so they don't have to worry about mowing the lawn, stuff like that.
Right.
Small house.
Okay. Yes.
Small lots of land. Small housing on small lots of land.
Okay, so you're thinking still kind of a
Active.
cottage-type structure, a single-family type
More
structure,
active, yeah.
but higher density. Okay. Yes,
I think you
I
need.
wasn't ignoring you.
Yeah, no, I think you need something for visual, because I can imagine myself sitting by the ocean, and I'm 89 years old and I can't walk anymore. Because then there's a beautiful ocean to look at, or
Right.
or a mountain scene or something like that, as opposed to a parking lot or another building right outside the window.
This reminds me of a debate that's going on in Nantucket right now about where to put their nursing home, because they have to move it, and right now it has an ocean view. And there's this big debate going on. Do we spend a fortune to rebuild in that location to preserve the view, or do we build the nursing home in another part of the island and get it done faster and at lower cost? So it's very interesting to hear you say that. Yeah,
Well, think about it.
yeah, and I'm just saying that reminded me of that discussion.
Well, look at it this way, if they take the land that the housing is on now and sell that, because now they're gonna build brand-new houses with all kinds of money, they have tons of money, build a fantastic place further into the center of the island, and just have, people drive by with them trucks with the view on it, changes every morning. Have the mountains one morning.
So,
another.
Here's I think, an interesting dilemma, and it's one of the things that we're wrestling with in terms of trying to think about the zoning bylaw is, I hear you saying affordability is key.
I also
I-
like to mention, now that you finish, can I say a few words?
I'm not done yet, but go ahead.
Okay.
No, let's wait till she's all done, and
Yeah, yeah.
then
See,
no, Gino, really, let's
Yeah,
wait,
okay,
and then
you
we'll
finish,
open.
then I'll say something.
There's a potential conflict, if you will, between affordability and small single-family structures on small lots. And what you have right now is the ability to do something on a smaller lot than you normally provide. That's what your bylaw says. You can do 3 times the number of units if you have moderate income affordability for 25% of the units, or 4 times what you can normally do if you have a mix of incomes.
Can
But that's going to
developers make
reach,
money doing that?
that's why we're not seeing much of that. That's the market I was saying has become sort of a niche market, where you tend to see some of these active adult type developments. You still see them in resort areas. You see them in very affluent communities. A Winchester comes to mind. I'm picking on Winchester just because it happens to be going on there right now. But we're not seeing much of that product anymore because this market is aging. This market is aging. So, and then the other issue that really is probably the hot topic, I think, in the industry is, so we buy an over 55 unit now. It's deed restricted. When I'm 85 and I need to sell it because I can't stay there anymore, is there going to be a large enough demographic behind me to buy all these units that have deed restrictions? So I would say the answer might change a little bit if you said it doesn't have to be age restricted, but it does have to be age targeted, which is a design issue. So if your bylaw said, we want to promote housing that is appropriate for older Americans, and it's going to have these design elements to it, but we're not going to require a deed restriction, the answer might be a little bit different. But that is a big concern in the industry right now, is that we're building a supply of this stuff for which there may not be an adequate number of buyers 25 years down the road. So I'm not trying to dismiss what you're saying, I'm just trying to point out that there are these trade-offs.
And yet I've seen some very excellent, my aunt was in a thing up in Augusta, Maine.
Yep.
Which was absolutely beautiful. It
Yep.
was a long building.
Yep.
It had a memory unit which she was in, but her apartment was like a home.
Yep.
The place where she ate had carpets on the floor. It was gorgeous, and the outside of the building made no difference at all. I mean, it happened to be brick and it was on an edge of a thing, but they never went outside anyway. But, you know, that's why I'm bothered by having to pick images by, because it depends on what it's for.
Exactly. No, you're absolutely right. The challenge, the reason we care about what it looks like is that if you all said to us, we really need to provide in Littleton for assisted living, if that happened to be what people said, I'd have to say Article 23 doesn't work for that. So
Okay.
there are things that Article 23 works for, and there are things that it doesn't. And we're trying to get a sense of what's the community's tolerance level for something other than what is sort of traditionally built in Littleton.
Now, that's a different, okay.
Yeah,
That's a
no,
whole
right.
different
But
reality.
that's why we're doing this.
Okay, how many people drove themselves here? Drove yourselves here, how many drove yourselves? We're way up high. It's probably easier for me to say, oh yeah, they say, well, how'd you get here?
I definitely
How
drove.
many got rides from somebody else and were dropped off and they're gonna come pick you back up?
Walk.
You hoofed it? God love you.
Walked.
So, this group here is, you know, still very active and can come and go as they please, and, which is great. And I know that was one thing my mother, I'm not giving up my car, I'm not moving, no, none of that. She was, you know, bloody Newfie that didn't give up on anything.
But on the COA Housing Committee, we also represent a group of people who use 500 rides a month on the transportation that we provide because they don't have their own. So
Right.
there is a
Right.
very
Not
large
500 per
population
person.
too.
I mean, there's 500 trips that are involved with that.
500 people.
500 people use the Council of Agents. Okay. Well then, so now I think we, would have been nice to have a bunch of them here, huh?
Yeah, I guess the question is, you know, if I live in Jeanette Way, which I'm not picking, I'm just saying there it is, it's in a deed restricted, age restricted unit. If I can't stay there anymore because my needs change, where do I go?
Right.
In Littleton?
Nowhere in Littleton.
No.
So what, to me, I thought of how schools are when you're kids. The younger kids go upstairs because it's harder for them to get out, and you can keep an eye on them, they gotta fly. The older kids are on the lower end, is that true? I mean, remember third grade was up here and
Well, that was special needs where you were.
which is perfectly fine. I have terrific friends that are special needs, but if you'd like to stand up and compare, we're not gonna go there. So what I'm thinking is that if you got into one of these units and it was a three-story, and exactly in your instances up here on TV, you know, what are your needs? And as your needs progress, perhaps you come lower down, you know, or further up in the
Do
stairs.
these units have elevators?
So that's what we're looking at, is, and
I
again,
know in here, they have 2 floors and they put elevators in.
right, so let's just say that you move in and you're still healthy enough up and down the stairs, and you want to keep that exercise, so you're up and down the stairs. Not to say there isn't an elevator for the days when you get the groceries.
Yeah.
That's why you got kids to carry groceries up the stairs. So what I'm thinking is that in your instances, and what we're trying to accomplish here is to get something that will, you can go from 3rd floor to 2nd floor to 1st floor, being in a condo or a co-op owned unit.
And perhaps you could have some cottage-style housing in
Yeah.
the same complex.
And and then it's a fee structure, I would imagine. The more care you need, the higher up you go, or in the fee
It is,
structure.
and that's what makes affordability so difficult, because the service packages are expensive.
Well, there it is.
Peter, could I?
Yeah, we got a lot of issues
1 second,
to talk
please.
about.
Oh, yeah. This-
There were two things that I wanted to mention. You made a good point earlier that as time goes on, besides being active adults who want nice, cute houses and they can get in and out of the house really well, but that next step for assisted care, I think our town has to be looking at that too. So I don't know how to combine them, but there's two separate things when you're talking about those things. My second point I wanted to make is that some of the affordability ones that we had in Littleton, my wife and I marketed it, but the state had a problem where you had people that wanted to get in, they were sizing down in their house
Yes.
a lot, and they wanted to get into these houses, but because they sold their former house and had a tiny bit of money in the bank,
Right,
they didn't qualify.
that's right.
So we have to get around that somehow, and it was a state requirement. Up in, it was mentioned there on, which lane? Reed Lane. That's one of them, where the developer had to give money back to the town for housing in the future, because he couldn't.
So the market was gone, there was no market for it, which is, again, the tax
People
codes.
wanted it.
There was
Yeah.
market, but
Yeah.
there was affordability part, they had a tiny bit of money.
Right, the tax code makes it, forces you to spend more and more money. You sell something for 100, you better buy something for 100 more, you pay capital gains on that difference. That's tax code, I mean, how are we gonna get away from that?
Yeah, the affordable units have both an income restriction and an assets restriction, as I'm sure many of you know. So it doesn't take much when you're selling
So
your
you gotta give all
house.
your money to your kids.
But you can develop someplace that has individual houses which are senior-oriented. In other words, they're one-story, maybe 2 bedrooms to start with a kitchen because of people living independently. The Baptist Church in Worcester has a very beautiful setup down there where you then have an apartment building 3 stories high, which has apartments in it and communal eating and so forth, and people can move from one to the other, and when
Right.
they're in the houses, they can eat
That's
at the
right.
dining hall. Those, and there are certain
Remote
amenities which are provided, so you can combine them and make not necessarily all the way from, first time into death, but pretty much, you can do that kind of thing, and it is possible to do it at a somewhat reasonable cost, and a nice amenity. It ain't cheap. I'm not trying to kid anybody that poverty level person is gonna, go in and pay for it, but there are possibilities for doing that to provide for seniors who have reasonable income.
There is a place like that in Tewksbury.
Yes.
Emerald Court
Yes, and everybody Emerald's Court, yep.
And what about
has
Carlton Willett?
exactly everything you need.
Carlton Willett in Bedford. That has a lot of everything you're talking about, from the independent houses to the apartments
Right.
to the nursing home and
Well,
stuff like
that's
that.
if it has 3 or more services, and people who live there can have the opportunity to sign what's called a life care contract, then it qualifies as a continuing care retirement facility.
So Pam has been waiting,
No, no, I know.
Pam has been waiting for quite a
Yeah,
while to
go ahead.
ask that question.
I've been trying to be patient about this. I think that everyone in this room would agree that there are aspects of what we've talked about that certainly people in this room want, people in this community want, people in this community need. But you touched on this early on. So developers are not building these.
Well,
Now,
not
part of
building.
it is the coding, that's part of it. But if we're going to change the code, what can we do to make it attractive so that developers will want to build it? Or is the solution that the municipality has to step in if you want a diversity of housing that's away from what the market will push?
Well, no, you can zone for that diversity if you want. The question is, will 2/3 of the voters coming to town meeting agree? I mean, you could change your zoning and just provide for assisted living. You could provide for assisted living developments. You don't even have that in your zoning right now. You could allow you could zone for a product that would be independent living like, but it would be a multi-family dwelling. And so that's where the building form starts to kind of depart from what you're used to in your community. That's why we're having this discussion.
Now we're back to
because-
the pictures. Then
Right,
what
that's
will-
why-
What will people come to town meeting and say, yeah, I'll vote to have that in my town?
That's why we're having this meeting.
Yeah, see,
My question has to do with perspective.
Chair, please.
If I could ask the following question. So far, we're talking about what folks in Littleton might want and trying to balance that off with what developers are capable of delivering. Should we, to what extent should we adjust or start thinking about how Littleton, who is the market? Because in general for both affordable housing and elderly housing, it doesn't matter what community. You can apply outside of your hometown. For example, people from outside of Chelmsford can apply for housing in Chelmsford very easily.
Absolutely.
It's all portable. So instead of thinking just about what we need, however great that might be, it could very well be that to make it very attractive, we have to think, what would the area in general,
Sure.
what does the developer, or what would developers look, if Littleton were a center of elderly housing development, what would be the attractive market for us thinking regionally?
Well, it isn't, as I was saying, it isn't just people my age and older. It's my children. People are, I'll tell you, first of all, the developers are looking for wealth levels because these developments are expensive. And so you may find something reasonably priced in Worcester, but it's still pricier than a subsidized apartment. So the first question is, I know it's going to cost me to build this thing. And I'm going to have to manage it, and I'm going to have to provide a certain type of service package in order to get people to live here. So the ultimate cost to live in this development is going to be X. Where are the incomes that can support that? And they're looking in two areas. One is the elderly, and the other is the sort of 35 to 55 year demographic, the children of the parents.
They're gonna have to afford to pay for the parents.
Exactly, exactly. They're looking at both. And they're, and again, it's, when one product line kind of gets saturated, when it slows down a little bit, then they're going to look for something else. Memory care right now happens to be something that is, I hate to use the word hot, but it is. The typical over 55 kind of development isn't so hot right now. It's very much not hot when it has an affordable housing restriction associated with it because of the reasons that you described.
Judy?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Judy, I'd like to know what we could build under the current zoning we have in our town here, and what it would take to reach a level where we could provide multiple types of services in our town.
Right now, what you can build is pretty much what's been built under the bylaw. You can have an age-restricted development that consists of single-family or two-family dwellings. At least 25% of the units have to be affordable to people who are moderate income, and not carries over on resales and so
We're
forth.
talking about 40B then, right, Annie?
No, I'm just saying, I'm talking about what you can build under your current zoning. That's what you can build, is what you've got.
With our bylaws as they are.
As your bylaw is right now. As Article 23 is written, that's what you can build.
And the last time they did it, they had trouble selling the unit.
Right.
Right, the affordable housing restriction is a big problem with over 55 developments. It has been everywhere, that's not just in your town. This has been a big problem in a lot of communities. If you want to build something else, I'll get to these questions in just a minute. I'm trying to answer yours first. If you want to build something else, you have to add definitions to your zoning for assisted living, for multifamily dwelling, for independent living, for CCRC, whatever it is that you want to build, and then you have to provide for it in your use regulations. That's basically what you have to do. I should let you run your meeting, and I shouldn't be like, who do you pick on people, and I'll answer questions. How's that? You've got that thing. I don't.
He's the boss.
I only picked it up when you started interrupting me and calling her sweetie and honey.
I know.
Nancy, would you please?
Hi, Nancy Levine.
Yeah.
We have affordable housing in Littleton right now that people can't afford.
Can or cannot?
Cannot afford.
Okay.
Some of them are brand new. My Way, the Apple Dior in back of Route 2A 119 going towards Acton. Some seniors were interested in moving there because they can't afford their taxes. They can't afford to move to the affordable housing. The other thing is that if we did decide on what we wanted, and it's not going to happen here tonight, where are you going to put it? Land in Littleton is very expensive and very hard to come by.
Right.
So we're doing lots of good stuff here tonight, but where are you going to put it?
Okay.
And there are other things which you need to consider. If you're going to have independent people, they need to be able to get to the amenities in town, Donlands, the Point, so forth and so on. And if you think only in terms of putting them out in the backwoods, you've accomplished nothing.
We're not looking to put anybody out to pasture yet.
Right.
Yeah, so there's a whole transportation, I'm saying there's a whole transportation aspect with it if that happens.
But it depends on the market you're trying to serve. If you're trying to serve the older independent living demographic or assisted living, transportation becomes less of an issue because that's often not a driving population.
But I don't think
Oh, wait a minute.
Littleton's interested in becoming a hub for old people to come from all the other
I'm
towns
not
and
saying
live
you
here.
should. I'm just saying that serving
No,
that demographic.
but I'm saying
But
that I
that's
don't
happening.
think we want to make it an attractive place to
Well,
fill up with old people. And I
what we
don't
need
think
to
the
do-
town wants to deal with that.
The feeling I'm getting is, no matter how we look at it, we need to end up with a place where it's gonna be one.
Yes, you're basically waiting back there.
Bless you.
My name is Mandana Haddad, and I'm very new into this whole concept. My exposure has been with my uncle and aunt living outside of Los Angeles in Laguna Niguel, which is an affluent neighborhood, but it has a very large over 55 plus assisted living community. And they purchased their two-bedroom unit for $250,000. They pay monthly fees and wanted to know what would be the cost of something similar to that, or whether we would be able to afford something like that in this community.
No. Assisted living, I can tell you because I just did this research for another town. Assisted living, rent and a service package, basic service package, because there's usually tiers. You can kind of buy more if you can afford it. You're looking at somewhere in the vicinity of $5,000 to $6,000 a month.
How much?
$5,000 to $6,000 a month
So how
for
would it
assisted
be
living.
that they are more affluent
I've seen it as low
there,
as $4,500.
and they can afford to have a lower priced assisted living communities? I mean, it's
It
a
is
very
possible to
affluent-
it is possible to do so-called affordable assisted living. It's very complicated. And it generally takes a nonprofit developer. People who are eligible for state-assisted health, some kinds of state-assisted healthcare services, often can have that sort of port with them to assisted living. And so part of that service package cost is covered that way. We do have a couple of assisted living developments in Massachusetts where they're almost all affordable, but they're deeply subsidized developments.
How
So-
can we do that here?
Well,
It's the problem with subsidizing is what it comes into.
it's the federal money to do that is really gone.
So what we need to do is and it's really, it's as simplistic as this. We need to find a way to be able to build something that is affordable. $6,000 a month is way more than you're spending now to live where you're living, isn't it? You could turn around and 4 of you move into one house and have one person to help you cook food and take care and drive you around for that kind of money. So 4 of you in one house is, what's that, $24,000 a month. You could hire somebody for $1,000 a week to do anything you want.
Can you cook?
I'm a damn good.
Yeah,
cook.
what people are typically
But
doing is
I
they're
guess
selling the house.
Right, but the issue is you need to find a way, both through the government, the federal and the state, that we can sell your properties, the ones you're living in now, not lose all that money. I don't think you should, I think that's your money, you work for it. You should be able to move to and spend the money whatever you want. If you can go into an assisted living and spend $100,000 or $200,000 to buy the unit, and then pay $1,000 a month or $2,000 for somebody to take care of you, and still have your $200,000 or $300,000 or $400,000 left over from the house you just sold. Why do they keep making it harder for us to enjoy the things you worked for?
You can do it. The question is, it takes 5 years. You gotta let me talk. Otherwise, I said, this is open meeting, and you don't
Just
let me
wait a
talk.
second, wait a second.
See the
Did I-
TV over there?
Wait.
I'm getting it. Look,
Wait a
I'm
second.
explaining something.
I'm
so
gonna tell you
understand.
when it's time, I'm almost done. When I finish, you can talk to your heart desires, okay? So
When-
that's
when
what,
somebody else left their hand?
no, you lift your hand, you can speak, Joe.
Come
or,
on, give me a
Gino.
minute.
What I'm looking to see is if there is a way that you can change, somehow we can address the federal and state government to try and change the tax codes before 5 years are up. So now, that's what my thought is. So that and I'm not far behind you
Now, can I say something?
with all my.
You
all my
sell
time.
a house, you know I love you, right? But
Yeah.
sometimes you're not paying. Now, 5 years, you put the house, the money in trust, and then you put $2,000 in the bank, but you have to put 5 years away. You have to wait 5 years. Then you can go to assisted living, and the federal and the state will compensate. Now, thank you. God bless you.
Peter, I'd like to make a suggestion.
Can I make, can I?
5 years.
5 years.
I had one more question for you, I'm
He's
sorry.
gonna go, then you're next.
I think,
Right here, all right, excuse me.
can I just, I think we're all here, and I thank you all for coming, and I think the reason that everybody showed up and we have such a large turnout is because the people in this room want to stay in Littleton.
Sure.
They've always had a big house.
Yep.
They want to find a way to go from that big house to a smaller house.
Yep.
The amenities and everything that go with it are further down the road. You have to get them out of their house first. And part of the problem with our bylaws are all the regulations. So we need to come up with a way to get rid of the affordable aspect of it so that you don't have to qualify to a federal agency or have money involved with it, and make it palatable to the developer that he's going to want to go down that road. And you're going to have to do it by density.
And we can
Right,
do,
you're
we
gonna have
can,
to.
Everything we have.
we can also incentivize the developer as a planning board.
Absolutely, how it looks and what you do is a little further down the road. I think everybody in this room would rather live in a smaller, and they're empty nesters now. They want to live something smaller, they want to live independent until such time as they need the services. We have to think about the services, but right now, they want to get out of that big house and that big mortgage and that big tax bill and go to something that they can afford. Not that's affordable, that they can afford. So
Okay.
that's where we should be focused.
So, and that's
All right,
fine?
hang on a sec.
Sure.
Wait 1 second.
Yes.
I'm gonna go down the line, next, then
That's
next,
fine.
okay? I'm just gonna go down the line.
So I just want to piggyback on what Mark said, and thank you all for coming also. I like the idea of the smaller housing in a denser development where the developer would benefit. I also think if there was a piece of property that the campus could also, maybe not right away, but at
Yeah.
some point,
Yeah.
develop a facility that provided the CCRC
Right,
type
type
of
model.
community. So they would have a place to have their, meals or social activities in that complex. Even if it's just a community house in the center of all the development that could eventually be added on to. So we don't have to, the developer doesn't have to spend all the money at once, but as the community ages, he's already collected the income or the rent
Sure.
and the care services to then construct that
We're looking at this
building.
crowd, they said there's a whole bunch of others that don't have the availability to come here.
Right.
All right, you're up.
So there's a solution that I've been pushing for quite a while now, and it's a concept of a 40R over by the train station. You know where the train station is? We have an industrial district that's pretty good size that runs from the train station down to the Boxborough line, and it's really empty and it's dead because industry is gone and it's not coming back. So my thoughts were to create a 40R as an overlay, not as a change in zoning. You have to do a zoning change to get the overlay. But the 40R, R means railroad, and along with the R comes lots of different benefits. It's not a 40B where they just come in and put whatever they want up. A 40R, we could craft the into our zoning 40R language that mandates a certain amount of affordability. We can craft what that affordability is. We don't have to take the state's affordability guidelines. We could use language like Judy alluded to earlier, that it's not deeds restricted, but age or appropriate,
Age-targeted, yeah.
age structured, and in that district, I envision seeing a small commercial component so that if we had, say, a community of streets, and those streets would have corner stores that would be small in scale, 1 story, maybe
sidewalks?
maybe corner, wide sidewalks, lots of trees, would be designed for walkability, bikeability, maybe corner commercial, but it'd be office, like doctor's office or dentist's office. Maybe I would love to see some sort of a connection to the town center by way of a bike path that goes along the 495 corridor. We can still do that because the space is there right now. That would get you, you could bike, you could motor car, whatever you wanted to do from that area of town. And then that whole area of town would attract not just seniors, but would attract a lot of our youth, our kids. Our kids have no place to live here either. So by crafting a 40R, developers will come because the permitting will be expedited. They get a pile of cash if they build it too, because the government wants housing near railroad stations, and we could specify no garages. We could specify minimum parking lots, we could specify wide bike paths, all kinds of things.
I like the Snout House.
But this would be an overlay, and we could create a whole district down there that would satisfy this whole thing, and developers would come.
The only thing I want
Okay.
to point out is that the definition of affordable
You're
is
next.
the state's definition.
Well, we could craft something into that.
You can't change the state's
But
definition.
we don't have to change the word of, we don't have to use the word affordable. We can use our own,
It's in the statute.
All right, that's very good. Young man, if you would please.
What I'm interested in, what is the possibility of including a condo complex or a apartment complex? We don't have apartments in town that people can move into at any rate, because our zoning doesn't allow them.
That's right.
I look at down the Overland A's, the condos which are down on 119, and there are some very lovely setups there where people could move in, not have to deal with, the exterior of their homes and so forth and so on. But we don't have anything like that for people to do. Is that a possibility to put into that kind of a?
Are you talking about the one down?
Wildflower.
Talking about 15 grand.
It's down to 119.
Oh, okay, all right. You know what the rent is in those places?
I'm sorry?
You know what the rent is in those places?
$1,800 for a 1-bedroom.
1,400.
For one bedroom?
14 for affordable, 1,800 for market rate.
Market.
Right.
2 bedrooms at 22 or something like that,
Yeah.
3 at $3,000?
Yep.
Nothing affordable about that.
There's nothing afford to
But
rent
yes, so
something.
that's what, when Richard was talking about the 40R, we could certainly write that into the
It would
zoning.
certainly, I would at least consider the possibility of providing some of it. And some of it can be done beautifully so that it is not a detriment to the neighborhood. It's a very positive thing.
we could create a neighborhood down there.
So,
Which is a great idea.
That's a resource, that's a resource that we
Once
have
again,
that
we're
no one else
getting-
has.
hold on, getting a little off kilter here. Need you to address your,
I guess I wanted, did you have a comment? Because I had actually a question for all of you.
While we're talking about zoning, I was wondering if this is an appropriate time to talk about in-law apartments and sort of expanding the possible use of large, single-family homes, because they're there, a lot of them are underused at the moment.
So just to point to that, I want to ask a question to some standing members here, maybe the select member. Didn't the vote come up a year or two ago about accessory apartments and it got voted down, or in-law apartments?
That was Peter's,
it was, that was the bang lady, yeah. And what it comes down to being is that the way the bylaw is written is you have to either be a blood relative or functionally dependent upon the other person in the unit. That's how it reads. Now,
Can they be changed?
Yes.
what they determined to be functionally dependent is up to the decision of the Board of Appeals, because they're the ones who decide whether or not you really have a need for it, if you can't show a blood relative. But there are ways around it which are actually foolish. And again, it's really skirting the law, but aside from that, after I actually, implemented it, saying there's people with giant houses, and they have garages and rooms above the garage. They can remodel them, somebody can be in it, they can get an income from it, and help them stay.
Right.
Now, this,
Or they can move into
Or-
their apartment and rent out the whole house.
right, now,
Right.
now, some of
Which
us.
should all be on the table. It should absolutely.
Right, so some of us have 3 and 4 kids, some of us have 2, some of us have 9. God love you. I'm one of 8, okay? That's- So, and this woman's statement was, well, in my case, I don't really want to move out of my big house. I'd rather, rent the apartment and get the income from that to help offset the taxes. Well, she says, well, why would you want to heat the big old house? And why don't you move into the apartment, rent the house for more money, and now there's more kids in the school system? Which I could also turn around and sell the house and have all those kids come in anyway.
Right.
But again, but who is somebody to judge what I can and can't do with my house? Whether I want to live in the smaller one, I can turn around and open every single room in my house to boarders.
Right.
I can have 50 people living in it if I felt like, isn't that true? Well, close, regardless. So, less government is better for me, is the way I look at it. And it bothers me that you can't do what I think you should be able to do. Now, you have to meet a bunch of other criteria in order to get that accessory dwelling. You have to have the parking, you have to have the septic for it, you have to have off-street, it can't be ahead of the building, the main building, if you add one on. But to remodel your basement, to remodel, you can, there's a dozen different ways, and we can also possibly get that to be part of the 40B process where you can. 40, no, not the railroad thing, it has to do with affordable housing. But I don't think that the homeowner should have to turn around and put their house into a deed restriction so that they can only rent the thing for X amount of money.
But Peter, we can do that now by just changing our own bylaws.
Well, let's see, we gave that a shot twice, to be honest with you, and twice. And now that somebody of some great, intelligence is coming to us telling, this is what you ought to do. Well, we tried doing it 20 years ago and it got shot
Well,
down.
maybe it's time.
Is it time?
It is time.
Is it?
It's time.
Is there a good TV show on that I'm missing? Is it? Oh.
Before you all disappear, can I please have your surveys? I'm just putting them in a pile.
But again, what we'd like to accomplish even still is, though we got some good
Sure.
ideas from you, we need to find a way that we can implement things for you.
There you go.
How do we do it?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well,
If that can be possible to do that, that'd be beautiful.
How do we find out
Yeah.
more about the 40R process and what it could bring to us and how we could?
set up a meeting with
learn
Richie,
about it?
because he is very
Thank
well
you, my
versed
dear.
in it.
Yeah, actually, I have a lot of that information.
I'll go in and see Maren, there you go.
Right. The town has to be willing to accept 8 units per acre for a 40R.
Or 20 units. You have to be willing to accept up to, at least a sub-district with up to 20 units an acre.
20 units an acre?
Per
There are
acre.
3 different land use types
Can you-
in the statute, and you need to be able to have a sub-district within 40R that provides for at least 20 units an acre of multifamily housing.
But that's how you do it.
Right.
Okay.
If you can do a zoning overlay district that's similar to 40R.
Right.
And has some of the benefits without having to go by the state regulations, without having to be a 40R.
Right, can
And
we,
given some of the
Yeah,
density concerns,
yeah.
we will have to change some other bylaws. We'll have to change some height restrictions more than likely. We'll have to change parking.
There's a variety of tools, really. I
Right,
mean, whether
but-
it's 40R or
But
just
we can get into that.
fixing your zoning. I mean, I think the issue, there's a lot of things you can do.
See, the
but
concept,
what do they want?
Hang on, Rich.
Right. That's the question.
What's the want, what is the need, is the question.
Well, and the need and the want and the will accept may not be well aligned.
And who will pay to build? We have to keep that in mind.
Well, yeah, you do have to, that's why we wanted to
Hang on,
tell you
boys.
what's going on with the market in this area, because what you want may not be all that attractive to the developers who are actually building this housing right now.
And we know what they really like to build in Littleton. They like to build $700,000 houses on 1 acre.
Right.
Sell them and that's it.
Well,
That's what the developers really like to do.
okay, but
Why
see,
wouldn't
when
they?
you zone a
They
certain
don't have
way,
any other choice.
you attract a certain
zoning.
type of developer.
Well, it's more than just our zoning.
When you have,
They're in it to make a living.
when you have zoning that allows for different product, you get different developers.
Right.
So it may be the case that right now the developers in your community want to build big houses on 1 acre lots, but that's all you let them build. So when you change your zoning and you allow other stuff to get built, you're going to see different developers come in here who want to do something different.
Right.
So I think it's important to bear that in mind. You're kind of defining the market with your zoning.
Right, so why we called this meeting and why we wanted to have this discussion.
That's why you're here.
I don't know what I'm doing here.
Have other
Getting out of the house.
actually taken on the responsibility, zoned in such a way, and then work with the developer so that they have control over it, and so it almost becomes a town-owned property. We could be talking about the federal government, we could talk about the state. I don't think either of those is gonna come through.
Yeah.
Especially in this day and age. I wonder, are there ways that towns have been able to provide, affordable, reasonably affordable housing?
Oh, well, I mean, there are towns that provide for affordable. It doesn't count to the state, so it doesn't help your 10%. If you care about that as of Census 2020 coming. You won't be able to count the units toward your 10%, but you can have a definition of affordable that is not the state's definition. You just got to know that those units are not going to count. They're not going to count. And some towns care about that.
I'm just thinking of the town even taking, thinking way outside the box of the town developing something. I know that one of these is federal that we have now, one of them is state, one of them is local. And, what are the possibilities of that being the case?
There are towns
need
that
to
have
think on that?
sponsored, affordable housing development.
Yeah.
For the most part,
Hang on a second.
they're trying to get units that count.
Maren, you were going to say something?
Yeah, and that was going to be the question, does it work for the town to try to develop?
For the most part, they're trying to get units that count. So they're giving away land, basically, or giving it away or selling it for substantially below market as a subsidy.
This is why we should be looking for a nonprofit as well, in my opinion.
Well, nonprofits sometimes can bring resources that others cannot, so, but I think, look, I mean, what the town can do, the most powerful thing a town can do is to make sure that its regulations do not create barriers to development. And that's a real rub in a small town that doesn't want to become some other town. But that's any town. Ultimately, what you control is how you regulate development. That's absolutely in your hands. So if you want to provide for small cottage type development at, we'll say 8 to 10 units an acre for the sake of conversation, you don't need 40R, you don't need anything but go change your zoning. Other towns have done it. You want a 40R, you can create an overlay district, you'll go through a whole bunch of hassles with the state, but you can do it.
I'm not opposed to any other option out of the box besides 40 yards. I mean, there's a concept of draft, it sounds like what we want to do is draft something that we can provide our own definition of what affordability is. And then create a special zone for that. We don't need to have.
But we don't want to paint ourselves into a corner where we suddenly find that we are open to 40Bs because we dropped below our 10% affordable housing.
But we can't, Pam, I don't know if we want to, that's a separate discussion than what we're having here. This is trying to
But that is
resolve.
something to keep in mind.
This is
Even though
something
we
to
meet
resolve the
our
problem.
criteria or our threshold, still doesn't mean we're protected from them. Sir, way else back there?
I was just gonna ask, as part of the new sewer that they're putting in the common, right? Shouldn't you look at the zoning or the build that's allowed in that area?
Absolutely.
Yep.
And again, we're talking about density, right? More than anything else. I mean, you need greater density.
In order to make them
account
affordable.
for both affordability as well as what the elderly population wants, right? They don't want a 1 acre. I'm not even sure they want a quarter of an acre.
Right.
Right? They may not want any acre, right? What they want is a building and a place to live. And so it's about density, and you could put it into that same new sewer system that we're going to be building.
Well, you could, and just to be clear, it is possible to build pretty dense development without sewer. It has been done in many places.
Sewer system.
Yes.
That's what
Yeah, but right now, the
Absolutely.
sewer, right now, the money that was
Absolutely.
allocated for the sewer system is for the 100 people in the downtown
Couldn't you
area.
add to the, couldn't you add?
92.
Could you add, I don't know, I'm
Yes.
new.
It's a valid question.
You can add to that because the concept, I was on the sewer study committee, is modular. And so you build for what you need.
And look, I'm 55, right? I'm right there. happen to have a teenage daughter, but my point is your idea is great, but maybe two of them, right? My point is the same thing. You've got the common, you want to develop it, you want to
Revitalize
boost it, revitalize it. That's exactly the kind of place that an aging population wants to live.
We've been in discussions with some landowners previously about land adjacent to the center of town. And one of the thoughts on it at one point in time that's thrown out was a building in the back over here that was multi-story, which would be exactly what we're looking for. You know, an assisted living, like an apartment type idea. And again, it would have involved a septic system or a sewage treatment plant. They've had a way to connect it to something already. So there was give and take, and it hasn't bared fruit yet, and we haven't had another discussion since then. And again, it's something we're not really, it's just kicked around.
But the time is. The time is here.
Coming, I guess.
Right.
is what I'm saying.
It's here.
We need to be a little more proactive in all the things. And again, here, how many more of us are gonna get too old to even get to see this stuff? Luckily, we'll see a new field, you know?
Right, 4 million
I
bucks.
played on that one 50 years ago, and you know, my kids are playing the new one.
Mike's got a question about.
Does he now?
Yes, he does.
Oh, wow. Hey, Mike.
Don't start us on that.
Apropos, December the 7th, mark it in your calendar, 6 PM, the committee created by the planning board, our parent, our mom and dad over here, the master plan update steering committee, along with the crew that Judy heads up, is going to be holding a townwide forum on major topics, and at the top of the list is housing. It's your top list. So bring your expertise that you just gained tonight, because you'll be ahead of everybody else in the crowd, I can assure you.
That's true. That's a good point, Mike.
And if you came to this, you'll have an opportunity to have a great influence on what's going to happen next, mainly reporting back to the planning board. So please let your voice be heard. And by the way, an extra added attraction is at 6 o'clock when it starts, there's free dinner. Because maybe, we don't know, there may be even entertainment.
When is that?
I'll bring my 12-string guitar.
December the 7th at the middle school.
All right, Gino, if you would, please.
I'm interested for one thing. I have 308 applications on the housing authority. My friend right there is on the housing authority with me. I would like to have all that board with me when I speak to the selectmen and to you people, but they gave me the opportunity to speak on behalf of the board. I have 308 applications. There were 350 applications for seniors. That means subsidizing housing. People that make less than $1,000 or $1,200 a month. They can't afford any luxury. They're just looking for a bedroom, kitchen, living room, bathroom, that's it. So that's what we need. We need 70 or 65 units on 7 acres. And also what they told me, they says, Gino, can you make sure you can squeeze in senior center? I said, can you do this for me, please? I mean, that's people talking to me. That's what we need right now. Not luxury home, not 1 acre, not $700,000 home, a place that can sleep every day and get up every morning and people that live in Littleton. Those are the people. And some of the people, they need subsidizing extra money because they can't live on their own area. They need, some people like in the trailer park, they need extra money. So if there is a possibility to squeeze 7 acres, and you know what I mean, with a nice septic system like they have right here, okay?
Gino, after you've heard of what's going on tonight, what would you suggest?
I suggest, I was elected by the people of kindly, from the people in Littleton, and then I got appointed by the governor, okay? And so I have to report to the governor because I told those.
What would you suggest the solution be for your comment
The
there?
solution is that the town, because I can see one selectman there, I hope he likes me. I like to have the blessing of, so we can retain 7 acres. And the question is, the town will be able to hold this 20 acres, the Cooper Farm, or any other place that there is ability to have 7 acres so we can build housing for the senior that they have no place to go.
So you're asking the town to see if they can find the 7 acres for you for
They
the
already
senior
have,
housing?
they already have 20 acres,
Subsidize the bill.
all right?
And
So-
and subsidize the bill.
Right, and the state will build with the state money.
If we can find 7 acres, that's what we're all looking for right
Right.
now. The piece of property you're talking about, there isn't a chance that's gonna happen because it was taken on a certain restrictions. Open space are one thing, and the Coopers wanted a ball field on the other. We have to find land, I agree with you 100%, but the land you're talking about is not gonna be used for that.
Look, I love kids, I wasn't in open space, I wasn't in any board that you mentioned. The question is, the town owns 20 acres and the seniors need a place to live, period. The soccer field, they can play at the high school.
Hey, don't start yelling at me.
No, I'm not yelling, I'm
You were
yelling.
yelling at me, and I'm not gonna
No.
put up with it anymore, because you come to my meetings, sometimes you do the same thing, Gino. If we can find 7 acres
Okay.
someplace,
Okay.
that's one of
I
that's one of our
apologize.
priorities.
I
It
apologize.
can't be done on that
I
property.
said 15 years I'm
All
trying
right,
to.
all right, all right, hey, stop.
I'm 15 years.
Stop, means stop. Annie, I got it correct? You did
Hello.
had something to say, didn't you? Didn't you want to?
I did, actually, I have a question for Judy. So the lovely line graph that you had going there indicating all the different age groups and where they are at this point in time and where they could be at 2030. Was it possible to also overlay the next age group coming up? So the, what is it, the Gen X people?
I actually did have that.
Oh, that
yeah.
wasn't
It was just
included in
hard to see it with all
Okay.
those lines, but Maren has the presentation, so you can actually
Okay,
see
great.
the chart. But yeah, it goes from 1990 actual to 2030 projected, and the different colors are the different age bands.
So in essence, based off that projection, we should be able to know what age groups we anticipate having here in Littleton and what kind of housing they could potentially need as well,
And
based on.
then the question is, what can they afford?
Right. So that's the one.
What's it going to cost the developer to build in this market, and can he or she extract from the income base here enough to make that
Make it
work?
viable. So, and it's going to again start with us needing to change some of our bylaws. It's that simple.
No doubt.
But see, when we
I
know.
thought I was done, but I couldn't. It's possible I'm not. You let me know if I'm all done.
When we know
Am I
where,
done?
not yet, No, when we
No,
know where.
you sure?
Excuse me.
I thought I was, I
Peter.
didn't think I was.
Excuse me.
But apparently I am.
Please.
Well, that's what I was gonna say to you, if I could allow to finish my
Why is
statement.
everybody so grouchy tonight?
It's just I hate being interrupted. I don't like when people interrupt. I don't like when people raise their voices. Say what you gotta say, let somebody finish, then the next person gets to speak.
Peter, can I finish?
No, let him finish.
No, I'm all set for now, thank you. Go ahead, Rich.
Thank you.
And please, every and ah throws a buck into the till. Okay, so let's see how we do.
Let's see.
Every a dollar goes towards paying for that 7 acres we need.
For those three.
You're up.
For those three needs intersect is where our bullseye is. And at that point, then we need to craft some language for whatever kind of zone change that would include a great affordability aspect to it. And it doesn't matter where it fits in town. I think your suggestion about more than just the south end of town is a great idea, great suggestion. Along the Route 2 corridor might be Route 2A corridor might be another place where we would look at that kind of aspect. So that if one of those other farms get bought up, like the Cooper farm got brought up, then we'd have more tools in our bag to than to allow just soccer fields. Thank you.
Thank you, Richie. Any other comments now that we're all having a lot of fun all of a sudden?
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn. I've had enough of the.
Who is
conference.
actually in charge of determining changes in bylaws?
Who is in charge of those?
And zoning and so forth?
We make the recommendation.
The town meeting votes on it.
The
Planning board.
Planning board makes the recommendation, and then the town meeting votes on it.
So that's something that you're gonna have to struggle with, and you're gonna have to, with the knowledge of what people want in the town and what we need to.
Yes.
You've got to provide some way for us to have a zoning that will allow that.
Yes.
And allow it
Yes.
reasonably so that we don't stick a big building in the middle of
We also
a set
probably.
of individual houses.
That's exactly what we're working on right now.
You had the floor when he asked you the question directly, please. People don't plan to
We can
fail,
al-
they fail to plan.
We can also try to tie this to the master plan on December 7th and go through that, so if it's in the master plan and in the zoning, it all ties together, so.
And participation be, honestly, this just here alone is fantastic.
Yeah.
And again, we've had how many meetings with the master plan? There's sometimes 2 people, 3, sometimes nobody. So if you don't participate, you said, how are we gonna name it? And mine was,
But then when we
you
had
don't,
Sorry.
if you don't participate, you perish. Okay? It just, everybody gets to speak and everyone gets to hear what they have to say. It's just easier that way. You're up, my love, make it short, because
I was
we have
just going to
a
say
motion.
that in June, 200 people came to that meeting, which was so
And then from then,
impressive.
what did we get?
You just did a
I just did. I apologize.
I want to apologize too to my friend because I love him. The question, it comes out, that's it.
Okay, now,
All right.
is there any parting words from the clan besides?
Where do we go from here? When? Are we gonna have another meeting with you, maybe?
Oh, I'll be back.
You'll be back with the information that we gathered tonight
I'm
and
going to be
some more
back with
discussion.
and recommendations.
And I have a motion to adjourn.
Could I ask a question? Who are you reporting this all to the planning board or to the master plan, or both?
Pretty much both.
I'm the lead consultant for the master plan, but as part of that, the planning board asked us to provide help with 2 zoning issues. This is one of them.
And again, the more people that participate, the better it is. I'd love for you to have to come to some planning board meetings, you know?
Well, there's fireworks this Saturday night up at the point, so don't forget
Yes.
to go up there.
Put on your ice skates. and-
7 o'clock.
On
Skating rink up at the point.
Thank you
9
very much.
a.m. on the 22nd, I believe.
Skating rink, start, Mr. Knox is gonna cut the ribbon
And it's gonna-
Wednesday morning.
Yeah, and there's gonna be some little hockey games from 9 till 12:30 on the 26th.
Thank you, everybody, for coming.
Hot chocolate.
Motion to
Thank you so
adjourn.
much.
Someone made a motion to adjourn.
Make sure I get your surveys. I think I have
All
them all.
those in favor?
Aye.
We're out of here, boys and girls.
What night is that? I want to make sure we get those.
Fireworks is Saturday the 26th.